All right, welcome all to this second episode of the Teaching Podcast, a series of monthly open discussions about interesting scientific topics around teaching, an European founded project on a computing toolkit for building efficient autonomous applications leveraging humanistic intelligence. Today we have the pleasure to host Patrizio Dazzi. Hi, Patrizio, and welcome.
Thank you.
And Patrizio Dazzi is a researcher on distributed systems at CNR, the National Research Council of Italy, where he is a member of the High Performance Computing Laboratory. He is also co-director of the Pervasive AI Lab, a joint initiative of CNR and the University of Pisa, and he is also the project coordinator of the H 2020 Accordion Project and innovation coordinator of the H 2020 Teaching Project, the project we're going to talk today. So welcome again, Patrizio, for your time, and I hope this is going to be a very interesting discussion. So let's start with the first question that I want to ask you, because I've seen that you are being very productive and proficient in, especially in the context of distributed systems, edge cloud computing, high performance parallel computing. So would you like to share a bit of insights about why do you think these topics are interesting in general, and maybe also linked to the idea of developing artificial intelligence systems?
Okay. Thank you, Vincenzo, for this opportunity. I'm very happy to be here today. Yes, as you mentioned, I've been working from several years to distributed system aspects. They're essentially my main research field, and as you already said, they are contextualized in different technologies ranging and the paradigm ranging from the more traditional distributed systems to cloud and edge technologies. What they have in common, also from including in them, let's say, high performance computing systems, well, they have in common the fact that they are the solution for providing computing resource when a single resource is not enough. So when you need additional computing capacity that cannot be provided to you by a single machine, you need to do the easiest thing that it came into the mind of everybody. So replicate and distribute the workload among different machines in the same way you would do with the human beings. So if the workload is too heavy, too much, you hire a new unit of personnel and you ask him or her to work, and then you redistribute the workload among different workers. The same happens with distributed systems, in which essentially you take the opportunity of using many machines at the same time in order to speed up the process. Of course, this has been the starting point. Then there are side effects on the fact that you distribute entities. The distributions also means the fact that some entities are located in some places, other are located somewhere else. So the side effect of this distribution is also that you can cover, let's say, in a sense, a broader area, each pieces of area having computing resources nearby. And this is the idea of edge computing, in a sense, to move from the big wardrobe that is the cloud to the pocket that is the edge computing. So you don't have to host the big to host application only in the big infrastructure, in the big central of data center, but instead you distribute the workload across many items that are located in a broader area. So of course this is easy to say, but quite harder to achieve, as there are some aspects that regards the communication, the orchestration, the deployment, the management, and even the idea of writing the application in the right way in order to take advantage of this complex infrastructure. In the case of artificial intelligence, this also applies, as the artificial applications that match this kind of distribution often have been designed with this distribution in mind. Example, just to mention one, is the federated learning, in which you compute a part of the learning process independently. So the learning process itself is distributed across many entities, and then you have a centralized authority or repository in which these these distinct processes, the result of these distinct processes are merged in order to achieve something more valuable. So just to provide a very, very, very short overview on why distribution can be something interesting also for artificial intelligence application.
Yeah, absolutely. So I totally get your point, and I think it's interesting to know that while we had a lot of progress in developing artificial intelligence systems in the last few years, I mean, these progresses, especially in the machine learning context, are in fact using more and more computational resources, and they're using parallel systems to be effectively trained, but maybe not so much in a distributed way yet. So I think it's a very interesting and challenging in terms of research perspective to try to put together more maybe machine learning, distributed computing, parallel computing, and artificial intelligence. So that's totally, I mean, an interesting venue of research. So I think this is also very much related to the efforts of the teaching process, the teaching project. So this idea of having a computational toolkit which can be deployed somehow at different levels of computation. So at the edge, on, I don't know, smartphone devices, on a car, on any computational infrastructure, but also being able to interact with other, let's say, agents or computational nodes outside the main application residing at the edge, and dialogue it eventually even with the cloud at this like big computational infrastructure, centralized infrastructure maybe. What is your role specifically within the teaching project, and is it trying to push the boundaries, let's say, of the distributed computing effort in teaching?
Definitely, the teaching is key and central in this perspective. I'm serving as a work package leader and innovation coordinator. Let's talk from the technical perspective more on the aspect related to the work package. That is the work package number 2, but this is not adding much to who is attending this this event. But just to say that it is the work package, so it's the part of the project that is committed to develop and conceive the distributed computing platform and computing and communication platform. This computing and communication platform in teaching has been designed in order to match the idea of a computing continuum that ranges from a cloud, a remote cloud, and passing through intermediate devices such as fogs, base stations, and any kind of devices that can be located through the path from the cloud to the end user can be efficiently, or at least can be used and exploited in order to leverage its own resources for the computing of the artificial intelligence processes. In more detail, from a more detailed viewpoint, what we do is to try to put all together a cloud that is a big capacitor, so you can expect a very huge amount of resources there, with a set of distributed resources that by definition and construction are more limited in terms of capacity, but are located closer to the user, to the end user, so providing uh, more limited latencies, network latencies. So in a sense, the user can approach these resources faster, quicker, and then hopefully have answer or support in a quicker way than it would have by relying only on a remote cloud. This aspect of having a continuum is very hot and active in the community, scientific community of distributed systems. Is not only from now on, but it has been a few years that people started thinking to this, but only recently with federated learning and similar applications, this strategy is finding a very, very good use case that can be tested and approached in a very realistic environment. Because before that, there have been many approaches and attempts to find application for these visions, but now there is at least one that is very, very real and very important. And this links somehow to the role of innovation coordinator, in which I'm trying to figure out what are the assets that can be developed and conceived within our project, and then providing input as to innovation processes, and then to see if what we develop in teaching, not as CNR, but as the entire consortium, can be something valuable for the European industry and in general to the people, European people.
Yeah, absolutely. And on that line of this idea that you mentioned, that it was difficult before to find applications that will leverage the continuum of computation, let's say substrate. So I'm not an expert on this, but I wanted to ask you. So I imagine in the past that this would have been interesting for companies. For example, they want to aggregate data at different levels, right? So for example, if there are like user private data, these data shouldn't leave maybe, I don't know, the plant or the factory in which they are operating, or maybe there are some different constraints that essentially are imposed by the application so that you can compute only at different, let's say, stages or different parts of this continuum. So was this not the case before? I mean, this idea that you would need at least a two-level separation, like something running on premises and something running on the cloud.
Well, take into account that the recent advancement on at least on the real world, so in the industrial community, that allows this exploitation of resources located on a wide area network is quite recent. So the real rise has been with the multi-access edge computing that is still limited to the vertical of telco companies. So the point is that if you take out from the equation a very low, a very limited amount of players, well, you couldn't have this access to a real access to these kind of resources. In fact, the companies that they need what you mentioned, so the distinguish between high valuable assets that they want to compute on premise and all the rest that they can accept to offload to the cloud, was referred as the hybrid cloud in the past, where past is not 20 years ago, but is 5 to 6 years ago. And this hybrid cloud was exactly this. So to arrange the computation in a way that you keep your important assets in your own on-premises resources and you offload the rest on the cloud.
Yeah, very interesting. Thanks for the clarification, Patrizio. And so related instead to the efforts of CNR. So I just wanted to mention to the people that are listening, will listen to us and the recording on YouTube later on, I mean, that are not maybe familiar with this organization, but I think it's been like a fundamental asset for the Italian country. It is till now, but at the same time, it's not well known, I think, from the outside as it should be. So I just wanted to mention that CNR is the largest public research organization in Italy and a top-level R&D performer in Europe, being the fourth beneficiary of the EU FP7, let's say, financing program. And so CNR participates to teaching project with its biggest, I would say, ICT institute in Pisa, in which you are, right, Patrizio? And how does in general, the CNR expertise and background fit into the teaching projects and the idea of a pervasive AI system? I mean, apart from what we already described before as your own role in this organization.
Well, CNR, as you mentioned, is quite big, is really big, to be honest, at least for Italian standards that are not the same in China, probably, but for Italian standards, we are quite big. We are scattered across the entire Italy, the entire country. So we are a kind of unicorn, meaning this is why we are often perceived as a very strange entity. And also because we try to focus to any kind of scientific and not only scientific discipline. So you have people working on legal stuff, people working on the Italianistic and linguistic aspect, ranging from computer science, computer engineering, and everything that came into your mind. So this is one of the virtue, but also one of the problems, because essentially it's very hard to explain what CNR is. Take into account that my institute has the problems of having more funds than people that can hire with those funds, whereas next door there are institutes dealing with the different topics that have potentially many people to hire, but very limited.
I don't know which is better.
No, I don't know either. But that's the situation. So this is why it's hard to describe what CNR is. In any case, take into account that we are so big that even if limited to Pisa, but this is not necessarily the case, as there are many computer science institutes in the southern Italy, for instance, but also in northern Italy. So, but essentially limiting even to Pisa, there are a couple of institutes also only in Pisa, by the way. But even limiting only to ours, I can tell you that there is a lot of interest on topics that relates to teaching. In fact, I really hope that once these COVID problems will finish, we will find a way to have a physical meeting with many people, because there are plenty of researchers dealing with the AI-related stuff, plenty of researchers dealing with high performance, efficiency, dependable computing. There is a group here working on dependable computing. Another one working specifically on pervasive systems. We have people that try to take the best from videos and by analyzing this video to estimate issues like how far is one object to another. And in order to do this, they also exploit some AI-based technology. So in a sense, there are many things that CNR as an institution can provide to the project, and the project has the possibilities, the potentialities to offer much to CNR as a test bed, as an item where to experiment a solution that has been thought and developed for other reasons. I want to add one thing more regarding this. Recently, we got funded from the central CNR here in Pisa. One initiative that is called AI at the Edge is one installation of hardware and software that will support the test bed of application aimed at running AI solution at the edge.
Interesting, very interesting.
Yeah. It includes servers, but also sensors. We are also considering the possibility of buying rovers to embed with
Wow,
yeah,
that would be great.
toys.
Lot of fun for us as well in Pisa.
And one thing that I mean, there are we are four researchers that are the ones that we are managing this aspect now. Hopefully, by the next autumn, we will receive the hardware, and our plan is to open this suite to also to University of Pisa and researchers that are interested in order to seek a collaboration and find a way to improve potential collaborations in this area.
Very nice, very nice. It would be great to have like a platform, a number platform, like full stack,
Yeah,
like from hardware to software to AI, and I think it will be like a great project. So keep us updated, Patrizio. And coming then to the main scientific challenges that you're facing within teaching. So do you have, as I asked also to Davide Baccio, that was the first speaker, let's say, of these interview style podcast, monthly podcast episodes. So do you see any specific interesting and maybe futuristic even scientific challenges that you're already facing in teaching?
there are, as I mentioned, there are many aspects that can be leveraged from the teaching. And we can also dive into all the details from a technical perspective. But instead of doing this, what I would say is that what I really love of teaching, I think why I think it is fascinating is because of two reasons. The first is because the idea, very current by the way, of keeping the human in the loop that we refer as humanistic intelligence, with the idea not only to focus to the human, but to take the best from the human and the machine. So that is, I think, the slightly different between this approach and the human in the loop barely. So in which we try to not only improve the service for the human, but also to take the best from the human. And this approach that I see we are focusing in teaching, I think it can be revolutionary. Can be revolutionary because we are somehow saying that, okay, beyond the plain idea of trying to advance the single aspect, the specific aspect, we are instead trying or create an environment, a system in which there are mutual benefits from the human being in the middle, but also from the system itself. And the idea, for instance, of not trying to, just to mention one of the aspect that relates to teaching with respect to this goal, not to try, for instance, to improve the level of autonomous driving of one of our two use cases. That could be challenging, but there are plenty of people working on this, and then the advancement that we can bring could be very marginal, but instead to focus on optimizing the comfort of the users. So taking, let's say, state-of-the-art solution for the autonomous driving, but improve them, keeping in mind that at the end, you are doing the autonomous driving not as a goal per se, but in order to enhance the life of the people. And this, again, I think it's really revolutionary. And as the Seek for the Moon has been, I think that the grand objective can also help in the definition of all the technologies that you develop in the path. For instance, just to come back to ground and mention very specific technologies, the advancement that we plan to bring to the multi-access edge computing is something that I think is very valuable in the way we are doing in teaching. The idea of exploiting GPU and FPGA's devices in order to do the training and the inference of AI model in the onboard is something that could be very interesting. Maybe not revolutionary, but still interesting. The idea of putting everything together, this could be revolutionary. So I love the approach. And I think that we can do something very, very nice in this project from this regard.
Thank you, Patrizia. I think that it really shows some passion also for what you're doing and what we are doing in teaching. So thank you for that. And I think this would help us. Would help also people watching this to trying to grasp what we are trying to do here, trying to put together things not only in a technical level, but also trying to connect people, connect communities, and in the end work towards like a noble goal, I would say, of making these AI systems like not only robust, autonomous, and effective, but also like trying new synergies, finding new synergies with the humans as well. That in the end is going to be like the way we're going to live in the future, I guess, trying to live together, not against. Okay, so can you maybe give us an overview, an insight on maybe one particular aspect on a technical level that you're currently facing, or maybe some results that you already obtained or you're proud of? I mean, anything that would, like, let's say, ground these ideas, this perspective to like something that we do actually, and you do on a daily basis, right?
Well, I think that a couple of results that we are having in recently from some preliminary experiments is, on the one hand, some good results on the communication platform, that in the way it has been designed and developed not by me, but in particular by the other research group that is involved from my Institute of CNR in teaching. They are so this wireless network laboratory. They are developing a very, very nice architecture in terms of supporting vehicles moving around, and still, when moving around in area with very low coverage in terms of infrastructural networks, to be able still to exchange information through roadside units or even stranger, wider kind of devices, but with the objective of guaranteeing an effective development and support for the federated learning support at the basis of the project. The other result that instead we are more involved in is on the orchestration. We are working together with, as you know very well, Work Package 4, that is the work package developing the AI as a service, artificial intelligence as a service for the teaching project. We are working to link the achievement and the goal that are sick by this work package, align them with the structure of our work package, so with the communication and the communication platform. The idea overall is to provide a platform that will be supportive of these AI as service solutions in order to provide a tool that in a seamless way will provide to people developing AI-based application to deploy those applications in the vehicle, in the cloud, in the intermediate devices, without having to deal directly with the complexity of managing this distribution and deployment. We are, to this end, we are exploiting some technologies borrowed from the topic of edge computing and from virtualization and containerization. To this end, we are also trying to build a kind of liaison with the project I'm coordinating, a coordinating project with the teaching one, in order to see if there are some aspects that we can mutually exchange in order to improve the output of the two projects.
Very interesting. I mean, it seems that you're really into trying to put these efforts together, like trying to connect at least different aspects or side of things. So I'm really happy to hear that, because I'm also on the same line of thinking, and so it's great to see that there are more people trying to connect the dots, let's say, in general. And So just one last question before closing, let's say this great chat, this episode. So what kind of impact would you expect at the end of the project that we know has been delayed somehow by the entering on the stage of COVID-19, but nevertheless is going on well and in line with the expectations up to now, but there's still like a couple of years ahead of us. And so what do you think this project would enable, especially maybe on your, let's say, own community, on more like computational side of things instead of the pure AI things that we just covered and we also discussed in the previous episode?
This idea of the computing continuum, as I was mentioning, is something that in my scientific community is something very, very important now. Is something that the community, the scientific community, is trying to apply to many different use cases and environment. The idea of teaching itself is to provide a very nice test bed for this kind of approach, and also its enabling technologies. Say that finding a single key impact that teaching would provide is not that easy, but not because there are too few, but because there are too many in principle. And I think that all in all, the idea could be, first of all, the system itself, as we were mentioning, to put the human in the middle, but not as only as a user, but also as a feedback and producer. The other aspect that I like it very, very much of teaching is its cross-topic nature. So it is very interdisciplinary. And the idea of putting together AI and distributed systems is really cool. And the fact of realizing the pervasive AI lab that we developed thanks to teaching, because it has been teaching that drove the generation of this lab, could be something that has the potentiality of opening at least to strengthen a field of research that is the one that is at the boundary between the pervasive art and high performance systems with AI.
Yeah, absolutely. And so just one question that popped in my mind. So when you say that the Continuum Edge Cloud, it's like an interesting venue of research, like the target of research for your community. I mean, do you mean that? What's the main goal there? Trying to make it as smooth as possible, or there are some, let's say, other objectives that would, or is maybe just the technology, the actual communication technology that's missing, and it's the focus of that, or it's the applications, as you mentioned, that need to be like, you need to find like a killer application for that.
Well, there are many aspects that worth an investigation. Definitely the idea of exploiting different heterogeneous architectures in a seamless way, as on the edge you can expect to have very different resources than the one that you have on a cloud. The aspect related to data management. If you look at one very successful tool, not for the continuum, but still for the management of big computing platforms, that is Kubernetes, one of its key aspects is a clear separation between data and computation. This allow itself this tool to be very efficient in being reactive depending on the actual needs that may change, and then this infrastructure need to be ready. Well, this approach is definitely something that need to be adopted as a standard approach in all the application that wants to approach and go on this kind of distributed continuum. So this also opens another aspect that is still of paramount importance. So how application should be made, both from the conceptual and also technological viewpoint in order to be run on this kind of infrastructure? And the answer is not easy, because it strongly depends by the application, the access, the pattern of the access to data, the requirement that you can expect to have on the application, the relationship that a single part of the application has with all the other parts of the same application. So the network is involved as well in this case. How much you need to replicate in order to match the quality of experience that you expect to provide to the user, or to match the need of the application provider in terms of costs. So which is the contact point between these different requirements. And there are many challenges under this perspective that are worth to be investigated. And last but not least, one thing that it's worth to mention is that AI is not only a use case, but also a supportive technology. As most of the, if you take one of the key conferences or journal, top conference or journal, talking about resource management in these kind of environments, I can bet that 90% of them mention the need of using AI-based technologies for improving the location.
That's great. So yes, so there are many different levels of interesting, let's say, points that are worth investigating in this area. So that's great to hear, and I'm sure that many young students and researchers will find these words, like, let's say, illuminating, so that maybe we will find like the next generation of researchers in this area. So thank you so much, Patrizio, for your time. This, I would say, closes the second episode of our series. So if you're watching this on YouTube, please subscribe to the channel and leave us a thumbs up for this episode. And I'll see you again next month with a new episode talking about the teaching project. Thank you so much, and see you soon.
Thank you, Vincenzo. Thank you very much.
Bye.